Desperate times call for desperate measures. I was going to just skip over this passage, but my husband encouraged me, you know what, we should know what's in the Bible. So, this year in the USA, we are celebrating our 250 years of independence, way back in 1776. And some of you may know I'm a Jane Austen fan. And last year was the 250th anniversary of her birth. And I really appreciate her writing because it's funny and it has really good insights into human nature. And she grew up living in small villages. And I think we on Fisher's Island can relate to that experience where everybody knows each other and we all feel like we know each other's business. And if that was true 250 years ago, it was definitely true 2000 BC in Bible times, which is 4,000 years ago. So Jane Austen's dad and 2 of her 6 brothers were clergy members, and my mom was a minister and my grandfather was a preacher. So there's like a lot of expectations of very faithful living. And in the Bible times, you find that as well. People had high expectations for the leadership, and the family relationships were upheld very importantly. And I also appreciate the way that thinking about Jane Austen's time kind of helps me think about those Bible times. Because, listen, a woman's life was really wrapped up in her dad taking care of her. And she had to hope that a nice young man would propose marriage. And if he did, that he would live long enough to make that happen. So Jane Austen's sister was engaged and her husband died of yellow fever. And that was terrible. And then Jane Austen was proposed to once, and she said yes, but then regretted it because she knew she wouldn't be able to write her books if she was having 11 children, like 2 of her brothers' wives did, and then they died in childbirth. Oh my goodness. The realities of life back in the day. So where am I going with this? The society's norms were really bound up with the men as the leaders. So if a woman didn't get married, she would have to hang in there with her family as like the spinster, unmarried lady of the house. And then once her dad died, good luck. You had hoped that you would have a brother or 2 that would let you stay at their house. And that's what happened to Jane Austen and her sister and their mom after their dad died. They would live with their brothers and they would visit for a few months at a time. And it was a real drag because they were guests and they had to be on good behavior. And the brothers talked amongst themselves about how much they could afford to help them out. And this is what we see in poor Tamar's life as well. Well, when we think about some of the details in this story, we can relate to how the traditions have come down over time. And one way that there's a connection here is, you remember last week when King Charles and Queen Camilla came to visit the U.S.? He's got this, he's kind of a figurehead as the monarch. He needs to be neutral about politics and affirming of his government's decisions, and the prime minister is elected, but he's a very important international figure, and diplomacy is really important. And you may have noticed that he wears a signet ring, which features in our story. And a signet ring has like a coat of arms that is a symbolic representation of this person of importance. And that was also true back in the day. The guy Judah that we were hearing about had a signet, and his was attached with tassels. Like, that's why it said a cord. So you would see on his person this beautiful piece of jewelry was something visible to all as a public figure and leader. And also, sometimes King Charles walks with a walking stick, a cane, as his mom did, and as many people do. Characters throughout history, dapper gentleman with the walking cane. Well, that's similar. When you see that walking stick that has been held by that leader, you know who it belongs to. So that's kind of what we're seeing in the promise that the down payment that Tamar was smart enough to ask from Judah. All right. So here we are. I got to be brave. We're going to talk about it. Last week we started the Joseph cycle, and it's part of the saga of God's covenant relationship with the patriarchs and matriarchs. And it's the concluding dramatic series that finishes up the book of Genesis. And so we've been hearing about these sons of Jacob and how they have treated members of their family, including Joseph. And it was perfect timing, since a few of us went to see Joseph in the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, and Ellen and I went over there, and there were 12 of us from the island. It was just so much fun to support Charles in that production. And now we find folded into this narrative a vignette that takes us on a real adventure about one of the brothers, Judah. And you may recall that he was the one who, Reuben, the eldest brother, said, I know we hate Joseph, but maybe we shouldn't kill him. Just throw him in a pit, and maybe he'll live. And he wanted to come back and save him later on. And then Judah was the one who said, hey, you know what profit is there if we just leave him to die? We could sell him to sell him into slavery, and that'll get rid of him, and we'll make a little money. So he eventually ended up in the household of Potiphar, captain of the guard of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. So meanwhile, years are going by, and here's what happened with Judah. He goes and gets married. He has 3 sons, and so at least 15, 18, or 20 years has passed by. And in this story, we find God's providence in amazing ways. And it's also what biblical scholar Phyllis Tribble called a text of terror, because it's terrifying. Okay, so the way people got married, it was arranged marriages, because the parents wanted to make sure, the dads wanted to make sure there was a good alliance with the family. And they were pretty much in charge of who got chosen to marry whom. So Judah chose Tamar, and what a sweet young lady. We don't find anything bad about her. But apparently, her first husband, the firstborn son, did something wrong. And he did evil in God's sight and died young. It says God put an end to him. Now, the Bible doesn't say what the sin was. And our friend John Calvin would call this a curious question. All right, we can speculate all we want, but we won't really know the answer. And it's probably not important to know that detail, because it's not in the Bible. And if we needed to know, it would have been in there. All right, so then we get to, he dies, and it's really sad. And we get to the next thing, which is a practice called levirate marriage. And that's when the way for a family to continue their line was to have the brother of the man who died marry the wife so that she could have children, and they would be in the line of the original husband. Okay, so they do get married, and the problem is the second husband is like, man, if I have kids by her, they won't count as my kids. So he didn't complete the marital act, and that was really sad. Poor Tamar, what is she going to do? Well, God did not find that appropriate. He was not doing his duty. So he died. Oh my goodness, we've got 2 dead husbands. And poor Tamar's like, what is happening? And her father-in-law, Judah, is like, why don't you go back to your dad's house? And after my third son is older, I'll let you know, so you can marry him at some undisclosed time in the future. Years go by. She's wasting away at her dad's house, 2 failed marriages, she's a widow, she's wearing black, it's sad. And then Judah's wife dies. Okay, so now he's a widower, so we know the years have gone by. And he hasn't let Tamar know that he's ready to give his third son as the husband. So she waits, and he's in mourning. And this is where God's providence comes in. Somebody in the village let her know, hey, I heard that your father-in-law is going to go have his sheep sheared. He's going to go north. And she says, oh, hey, thanks for the tip. I appreciate that. And so she gets dressed up. She takes off her mourning clothes, puts on regular clothes and a veil. And she's in the right place at the right time. Now, if we're thinking back into Genesis, we know that there's been a lot of shenanigans about family members with veils and clothing that let us know or trick us into thinking somebody is or isn't who they really are, right? Okay? Oh, man. Jacob himself, he stole his brother's inheritance by pretending to be him, wearing his fancy clothes and all of that. And even before that, there was the sister and the other sister wearing the veil, getting married to the wrong one, when there was Rachel and Leah. So it's kind of a theme. The tricksters are getting tricked, and the people are wearing different clothes, and somehow Tamar decided to be brave and take a chance. She knew that the only legal family member that she could produce an heir with in the family line to be able to become a mother and to have an heir for her original 1 and 2 husbands was to see if she could convince Judah to give her an heir. Oh my goodness. What a terrible situation. Desperate times calling for desperate measures. I did not envy this young lady. Well, so she had to be bold and brave. She wore the disguise. She put herself in the right place at the right time. And then she was really smart. Because he's like, I'll give you a lamb dinner, honey, tomorrow. And she's like, you know what, actually, I'm going to need some tangible down payments. And it's going to be all the stuff that people know you wear on a daily basis. It's going to be your signet ring, which is like the credit card that he used to pay for everything. And he wore it on the cord, the famous tassels, and that walking stick. Okay, so God lets us know immediately that when the deed was done, God let her be pregnant. It worked. God provided a way when seriously it looked like there was no way. And so she went back home. She put her widow's garb on. She put those special objects in a good hiding place. I think her dad and mom were like, yeah, oh yeah, we are holding on to these items and nobody's getting near them. Okay, so the next day, Judah sends his friend to go take the lamb to her and can't find her anywhere. And they're like, well, he asks around, like, where's the prostitute? And they're like, listen, buddy, there's never been a prostitute here. And he's like, what? He tells Judah, and he's like, oh, okay, well, I guess we better be mum's the word about this. I don't know exactly what happened. We don't want everybody to laugh at us. We tried our best, couldn't find her. She should just keep that stuff. I'll get all new stuff. I'll get all new gear. Let's just pretend it never happened. Okay. Well, 3 months go by, and the villagers are talking, and it's evident that she's pregnant. Maybe she's got morning sickness. Who knows? And here's the part that's really sad. Judah, when he finds out about his daughter-in-law finally getting pregnant, he's like, she should die the worst death. Let's not stone her. Why don't you bring her out and burn her to death, okay? And so all the leaders of the town are there, and they're going to judge her. And she says, oh yeah, okay, definitely, I'm coming out, and with me, I'm bringing this signet ring and the cord and the walking stick. And I want you to take a close look at them, because the person they belong to is the father of my child, the reason I'm pregnant. Could you please identify whose these are? What? Oh, finally, he confesses. She is more righteous than I am, because the only reason she did it was because I withheld from her my third son. She is more righteous than I. Whoa, he confessed. He admitted it. And then he left her alone, and she didn't get killed. Oh, thank goodness. As a matter of fact, God's providence was so much of a blessing. Not only did she have a baby, she had twins. And they weren't twin girls, they were twin boys. And so the line of her husbands continued. Yeah, amazing. The fighting of the twins is also a theme in Genesis. Who's going to be born first? And the scarlet cord around the wrist is kind of like a preview, leading us back to think about the twins, Jacob and Esau, and forward to the scarlet cord of Rahab. And we're also learning that Perez himself is going to be one of the people in the line of King David, who is in the line of Jesus. Okay, Tamar was bold and brave, and she pursued the only course of action that she could figure would bring progeny, and she ended up being one of the ancestors of Jesus. Wow, and she's listed in the genealogies in the Gospels. Totally amazing. You have to think, all right, God works in mysterious ways. And as we think about the disobedience and the hypocrisy of Judah and his sons, we also have to think that God was still working his purposes out. God was making his will be done in a totally unconventional way, but in a way that was leading to the greatest king of Israel, David, who was the one that was meant to be the precursor of the Messiah, Jesus Christ. And it's amazing if you think about the women who are included in the ancestry of Jesus, in the lineage. This is another example of how God was helping them think about when it came time for Mary and Joseph, and God was going to do the miracle. God had worked in really unpredictable ways in the past to bring forth the child of promise. So it was a way for them to think in a new light that God can do what seems impossible. And in human terms really is impossible. But because of God's grace, God was providentially working through all of these difficult circumstances. Well, we might not have so much drama in our lives, but we can think of times when God helped us hear a message at a time when we needed it. And God placed us in the right place to have that conversation or to meet that person or to make an arrangement that actually was going to be God's will for our life. We can each think of a time when it seemed really unpredictable and maybe even impossible that God would bring all these different threads of our life to work together for God's good. And as we think about it, God wants us to not think of judging others, punishing others, but being open-minded about how God can work even through terrible circumstances to bring his purposes. Maybe we need to be people who seek to be righteous in the midst of our difficulties and to seek to follow in faith. It's a mystery. And as we join together in thinking about our own lack of righteousness, we realize that all that we can do is place ourselves humbly before the Lord and trust in his forgiving love, because he has paid it all for our sins and our foibles and our disobedience through the faithfulness and obedience of Jesus Christ. Amen.